Thank you for tuning back in. Today we're going to be talking about your three brains on pornography. So your three brains on porn. And for a quick review on the three brains, recall the hand model. Take your thumb, wrap your fingers around it. This is the model of your brain. The fingers coming over the front, this is your prefrontal cortex. This is your thinking brain. This is where you process goals, morals, values, learning from past experience. When things went bad, you were caught and your wife almost killed you, or you almost lost your family or lost a job. When your thinking brain is calm, it can recall those things very well and use them and make use of that information. This part of our brain, your thinking brain, is not fully developed until age 25. It checks out under stress. When we get overwhelmed, we don't think too well. That's where we check out. We don't make very good decisions. Then there's our feeling brain. This is your thumb. So this is your limbic system, your amygdala. It's the middle part of your brain. This part of our brain is always evaluating safety. Am I safe physically, emotionally, relationally? And it treats all those exactly the same way. So then if we're processing in that part of our brain sex, emotions, relationships. In the male brain, the part of our brain where we process sex is twice as big as the female brain. The part of the brain where we process emotions and relationships is twice as big in females than in males. So you can kind of guess what we tend to think more about. Again, we process information in the feeling brain before it ever gets to the thinking brain. It comes through here first. We're wanting to process safety, our emotions, our relationships before we ever get to reflect on it and think about it. Then using this model, your wrist is the brainstem. This is the body brain. This is the part of our brain that mobilizes the body to achieve a goal. I went running today, and so that mobilized me to get my muscles moving, loosen up, give me some hormones that I needed. Mobilizes the body towards a goal to deal with a threat. It will influence our blood pressure, heart rate, hormones. So whatever the feeling brain says we need to do or to deal with a threat, the body brain says we're going to go take care of that. Now, when it comes to our three brains on porn, we are dealing primarily with the feeling brain. You'll notice there's a small sliver here for the thinking brain. The feeling brain is the primary operator. When we see pornographic images, when you see sexually explicit images, this part of the brain for a guy lights up like a Christmas tree. It's like a volcano going off. They put women and men in MRIs and watched how their brains responded when they showed them pornographic images, sexually explicit images. And guys, repeatedly, almost all the time, the guy's brain lights up. Women, you can hear crickets. Some women will respond in different ways, but by and large, the guy's brain lights up, even if you're recalling what you've already seen. There's a lot of guys I work with where the more things you've looked at, it stays in your brain. And simply the recall of what you saw, maybe even 10 years ago, is now lighting the brain up. So what happens inside the brain, inside that feeling brain, when pornography or that sexually explicit information is being processed? First of all, we have dopamine. Dopamine is the gotta-have-it drug. When you eat something you like, when you're watching a ball game that you like, if you are going to go engage in any activity you enjoy, your body is going to release some dopamine. Now, the more intense it is, the more dopamine you get. This is what we get addicted to, is dopamine. So that's where you get an adrenaline junkie is really a dopamine junkie. Then, and this is where, with guys and sexuality, it dumps dopamine into the system. Dopamine makes me want more dopamine. It makes me feel really good. I want more of that feeling. It's a rush. For guys, when that dopamine is released in response to a sexualized experience or image, we release testosterone. What that does, it makes that dopamine even more sexually focused, even more sexualized. So this creates a really cool, a really nasty, in a way, feedback loop, like a snowball, where the more you think about it, you get more focused on sexuality and it feels good, so you want to look at more, and it feels good, so this snowball is really starting to roll. Now, to add to this little biological cocktail, let's add in serotonin. Serotonin is a chemical in the brain that helps control and influence mood. When serotonin drops, which is what happens when a guy is looking at pornography, anything sexually stimulating, it creates anxiety and tension. There's a tension that comes from it. But it's a sexualized tension, so it feels good, but it's still tense and tense. It makes you obsess. When serotonin goes down, we obsess. If you have OCD, you have low serotonin, so it makes you obsess on something, you lock in. So not only are these things feeding off each other, the gotta-have-it drug and the testosterone, but serotonin dropping makes you focus even more on whatever the source of that stimulation is, and really locking in on every detail of it. And it's adding more and more fuel to that snowball, and it's growing, and it's bigger, and more tension is being built up. These images, because of this cocktail, are seared directly into long-term memory. Not short-term, not trying to recall what you had for lunch the other day. This goes into long-term memory, and that means even later on when maybe you're trying to stop looking at pornography, all these images, all these videos are playing back in your mind, and they're visceral, they're real. Not just the image, you're recalling all the feelings that go with it. And now there's a bondage to it, which is really hard. But in that moment, when all this is building, all the tension is building, and the physiological tension is building, it's begging for release. It's this sexualized tension that's begging for something to release it, but it feels good, but it's tension. We got to go somewhere. You're obsessing, so it's hard to think about anything else. When that's happening, recall we process information to the feeling brain, then the thinking brain. This is overwhelming the thinking brain. So we're not thinking too much about what's going on. During that moment, this part of your brain where you're recalling your wife, your kids, your job, your relationship with God, or past experiences, that part of the brain is fading away. The more this builds, the less these are even in our mind, even in our world. I hear wives come back and say, how can you do that knowing this bothers me, knowing you may lose your marriage, your family, your job? And the guy goes, I just didn't think about it, and she can't understand it. It's not an excuse, but in a guy's brain, this lights up, that goes away for a while, fades away the more this intensity builds. This part of our brain that says, stop, this is a bad idea. It's hard to hear that in the midst of being super stimulated and obsessing on what you're looking at. This would be like going to a loud concert and having this part of your brain talking to you about like this, while there's just this loud rush of noise and people. It's talking, but you can't hear it. It's not going to have very much of an impact. The more this builds, the more that checks out. So what's happening here with the body brain at the same time, this is sexual stimulation. And recall, these parts of the brain really interact. The feeling brain and body brain, a lot of circuitry connecting these two going back and forth. Remember, there's circuits going from feeling brain to thinking brain. Not many circuits going from thinking back to the feelings, but it's hard to talk back to it. These two work together really, really, really well. So the sexual stimulation, your body's feeling sexually stimulated, having an erection, just everything, just feeling euphoric and awesome, and dopamine. Blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up, so the body is ready for sex. It says, yes, everything says we're going to have sex, so get the body ready, let's go. It really becomes a more compelling, overwhelming, visceral experience. Like we said, it's begging for release. That means at some point, there's going to be sex with yourself or somebody else. That means masturbation. That means going and hooking up with an affair, a massage parlor, even your wife. But if it's more about just getting a release because you're turned on and nothing personal, it still has an impact. But when that happens, the body releases this chemical called oxytocin. This is a natural opiate. You're going from hyped up and revved up and ready to go, and man, this is awesome, but it's overwhelming, and oh my gosh, to when you act out, it dumps oxytocin into the system. For a guy, the biggest release we get of oxytocin is during sex. In that moment, the body and the emotions calm down. Everything that's been building and growing and obsessing suddenly calms. It's euphoric. It's surreal. This part of the brain called the amygdala in the feeling brain actually shuts off for a while when the oxytocin gets released. That means anything that was bothering you, anything that made you feel anxious or insecure or out of control, you're not feeling it for a while. You are literally on a buzz, on just a chill coming out of that. That's why this takes on such a great drug-like quality for guys, because it shuts that down. Feels good, feels surreal, but then life begins to come back in, so that's when you start looking for the next fix. Or you feel bad, so you find something else. But there's a very drug-like quality to this, which makes you want more. Then it gives you relief afterwards. So it's very stimulating, but then very calming, very soothing. And everything gets involved, the feelings, the emotions, the physiology. And all while this is going on, that thinking brain is checked out. So that's why it's very easy to have this take over if you're not careful with it. Last but not least, where this becomes a very addictive drug-like quality, pardon me, is tolerance. Tolerance is the idea that when your body is releasing dopamine, when it says, hey, this is great, we're going to have sex, and you're looking at these women and seeing these images of people having sex online, on your phone, on your iPad, whatever it may be, even in your recall, initially it's novel, it's new, so you get a big release of dopamine. Well, the more you look at it, the brain goes, this isn't so interesting anymore. In fact, it's not even real. The brain begins to pick up that's not real, so it gives you less dopamine. That means it's less of a rush. That means it's less interesting or invigorating or consuming or escaping. So that means you have to find more extreme things, more exciting things to look at to give you anything close to that same feeling of dopamine, of rush, of enjoyment. That's why you start going from looking at pictures to videos to more extreme videos. Now into fetishes, there's different things that come out of that. The same thing happens with oxytocin. At some point, the body and brain know it's not real sex. So even if it is with a person, if it's not real connected sex, the body realizes it's just an escape. It doesn't count, if you will. And so it gives you less oxytocin, which means you're getting less relief. You're getting less stimulation, less relief, so you have to go for more, either more frequently or find more intensity to get that release. That's where there's a drug-like quality. You have to go more and more to get the same effect, even though there's negative consequences. So this happens for anybody. There's a special piece of this we need to be aware of for our kids, especially for adolescents. The adolescent brain is 2 to 4 times more sensitive to dopamine. Let me say that again. The adolescent brain is 2 to 4 times more sensitive to dopamine. That means whatever we feel like is pretty great, pretty awesome, they think is totally awesome, way cool, over the top, amazing. And it blows their thinking brain even more. It just blows it out of the water. So for adolescents to see this stuff, it literally blows their mind. They can't handle it. It consumes everything. And plus, their thinking brain is not fully developed until age 25, so they have even less capacity to use that thinking brain to find their way out. That's why there's a need for us as parents to talk to our kids, not just about sex, but about pornography, about lust, about what they're going to see out there that we didn't see till much later in life. There's a need for that. Our kids need that. They're left out there on their own, and this creates a great seedbed for addiction. The more this takes over, the more they get into this whole cycle, it's really rough, because then they get to adulthood and they say, well, it's fine, no big deal, I'll stop doing this, I'll get married, they'll take care of all my needs. I can't tell you how many guys I've talked to that come in and they've been messing around with pornography for a while, got married, thought that would take care of it, and now they're scared, ashamed, shocked because it's not taking care of it. Their brain desires this more stimulating stuff. So I hope this is helpful for you to see how the 3 brains works together with pornography. There'll be more videos coming out, both on how to manage that intensity, finding ways to get out of this do loop, to get out of this snowball going downhill. But first we need to understand it. So thanks for tuning in, and there's more to come later. God bless.